Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hi, Rangers. It's me, Jackie Kashian. Welcome to the Dork Forest. It's 2024. Let's do this. Here's the credits, of course. Mike Ruekberg sang that song at the beginning, and he wrote that song, and he sang it with Sarah Cohen, his wife, and he will sing the Mexican hat dance at the end of the program. Also, Patrick Brady, still putting this together. Video, audio, all of it. He's amazing. So, and Vilmos doing JackieKashianStore.com. Squarespace is doing the regular Jackie Kashian page, and I'm thinking of moving the Dork Forest and dorkforest.com away from WordPress because it's driving me nuts. But those are the credits. But if you go to JackieKashian.com, you can get Dork Forest merch. You can get my stand-up merch. You can get my stand-up CDs and DVDs, which you'd have to have devices for those. You can also see videos and find out any number of things. I have another podcast called The Jackie and Laurie Show, but the Dork Forest is the flagship. 18th year. We're doing it, you guys. You can go to my Bandcamp or my YouTube for extra content. Please donate, is what I'm saying. It's 2024, and I think we've been in this long enough. Why don't you guys, everybody send me $100? That's what I'd like you to do. You can PayPal me. There's links all over the pages. You can Venmo me at Jackie Kashian. You can find me at a stand-up show and hand me a sweaty wad of 20s. Do something. But I love doing the show. I would love to make some money, is what I'd like to do. In other news, I'm sure there's more things that I should talk about, but I can't think of them. But let's listen to who's going to dork out about something, because that's my favorite part. Thanks for listening, you guys. You're all great. Let's get into the show. Hello and welcome to the Dork Forest. I'm in the dark. My guest is in the light of science. I am on the road in a hotel. Welcome to the program, Alex Mathios. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a fabulous weekend morning.
Yes, we just ran into each other on a couple of different comedy shows, and we ended up talking. And you said that you have a thing that you're studying in college, but you also, you kind of you were ready to dork out about it in the moment, and I was like, let's get it under control. Let's actually record it. That'll be perfect. So it's food science. Wait, actually, let me just do, your Instagram is at ZE_Mathios. It'll be in the notes, of course, but Alexander Mathios, and it's at ZE_Mathios. There we go. Now we all know. And now, here's what I know about food science. That Michael Pollan book and documentary. That's all I know. I read them, and then I watched the thing, and I was told that the apple was very important. And so all I know, and then I know that it was used, the power of food science was used briefly for evil, to create margarine. But that's
I can talk a bit about that too. I have some knowledge about that.
Okay, so what brought you to food science first of all? What did you? Yeah.
So first of all, a bit about my background. I am in my final year at Cal Poly Pomona, which is a polytechnic university here in Southern California, and I am active student and pretty active student leader in the Food Science and Technology program at Cal Poly Pomona. Okay. So we'll get into a bit of more what food science is later on, but just background, I'm in my last year of college. Please, and this tiny bit of disclaimer, on nutrition knowledge especially, that can be something that be controversial, people have different opinions about. I am an undergraduate student. I know a lot, but it's a shallow knowledge. It's not very deep knowledge. I am taking nutrition right now.
Yes. Okay.
So do not take my word. Even though this is a podcast, I doubt anyone will take my words as fact and verbatim. Do a bit of your own research. Talk to actual nutritionists and dietitians. If you have any serious nutritional questions, I'm here for fun trivia, not for, hey, is this going to kill me if I eat it? If I have this allergy? Right. Anything along those lines. Anywho, that out of the way. I loved cooking as a kid. I love cooking, and I've loved it for many years.
Okay.
I was actually a book kid like you.
Okay.
I approached cooking. I got into cooking in the most roundabout way of literally having my nose in a book in the library, going to the cookbook section on an unimaginable whim at some point, and getting engrossed in one cookbook, the San Francisco Firehouse cookbook.
Oh, so it was fire trucks and cookbooks.
Not even fire trucks, just browsing the library and looking at a book that looked good and had good illustrations. Okay. But it turns out San Francisco fire departments, in general, fire departments have to be good because you have a bunch of dudes living in one place for a long time. They're going to be working real hard, but they also have a lot of time where they're just waiting for something to happen.
Right.
So they oftentimes have actually really good cooking. They eat very well, especially in San Francisco, which is a foodie city. But they also have to be flexible because if they're called out in the middle of cooking, who knows when they're getting back.
Right.
So imagine a lot of long braises, but very flexible, easy recipes that a lot of range of
pots and
or just ribs in the oven, or really the best Caesar salads. Something can be done really quickly or over a long period of time, or be really flexible and in between.
Okay.
Incredible food, and it's an incredible cookbook. It really got me into cooking. I borrowed that book from the library for about a year and a half in a row before my parents just ended up getting me the book.
Right. You were just like, I'm going to also keep this book. Yeah.
From my book nerd, bookish start, I got into cooking and found myself slowly but surely becoming a home cook. My parents were generous with, thank God we have a great kitchen. My kitchen had been renovated when I was fairly young, so it's a very good kitchen to work with.
Big enough kitchen to sort of spread out.
And I was lucky enough to have relatively, I don't say open coffers, but a lot of flexibility in the understanding with getting weird ingredients if I needed to, because it was my passion. However, relatively early on, I knew that I wasn't going to be a professional chef or work in the restaurant industry. And there's two things that brought me to that conclusion. One, I'm a good cook. I'm not a good chef. I wouldn't say I'm the best chef because I still don't have the best time management skills. I'm passable. I do good work, but I don't do things quickly for the most part.
Do you think that that's a learned skill? Like if you had gone to culinary school, you might have learned that.
It is.
The multitasking? Yep.
First of all, I have relatively poor hand strength and somewhat bad hand-eye coordination on that neurodiversity spectrum, and that's, double tags on it. But I could have gotten over that. The other thing is, after reading, again, another book, Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential, just seeing even though that's an account of a restaurant industry largely gone, in terms of the drugs aspect of it and other aspects, it's very much still an industry where you're expected to work hard for a very long amount of time. You're on your feet. You are, even if it's your passion, you are putting your back into it. You're putting your life into it for a lot of your time, especially if you want to be, well, an acclaimed chef or someone people
like very successful at it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have you ever worked in a restaurant?
I have. Have you ever been to Legoland California Resort?
No, but I've always kind of wanted to go, even though Legos are not my downfall.
If you have any younger nieces, nephews, anything of that sort, it's
or
a
just
really great
adult
theme park.
Friends who love Legos. Actually, is
oh
what
yeah,
I do
that
have.
too.
Yes,
I didn't work on a full-on hot food restaurant. I was a soft serve machine. I served soft serve ice cream
guy. Okay.
Not just soft serve ice cream. It was a very complex system that instead of having different flavors, one base vanilla, but the flavors were in syrups that are swirled throughout it. If you ever look up Merlin ice cream cones or a Merlin ice cream at Legoland, it's kind of trippy looking.
Yeah, but it sounds trippy looking if there's 1,000 different syrups that you can.
It's a big old machine. It's only about 8. There's 9 syrups, but 6 syrups. Sorry, 6 syrups. But the machine, you have to learn how to, literally deconstruct it and reconstruct it and clean it out every night and reconstruct it every morning. It has about, in just the parts you're taking off of it, the parts that you are handling, not like the refrigerant and all the cooling, you are handling about 43 moving parts. And so it is a pretty complex machine because it's supposed to look good and taste good, but it's much more complex product than just.
And you had to break it down every night and
Oh
cleaned it,
yeah,
and then
you
good. That's
you
good to know. I
yeah.
will have soft serve ice cream when I go to Legoland because
Yes.
of this story. Because I have worked. I was a dishwasher in high school,
Hmm.
and that was filthy and thankless. And it wasn't
Hmm.
thankless. People were very thankful.
Yes.
And then I worked at a hot dog stand, and it was like a clam shack, hot dog stand,
Yeah.
fry
Yeah.
later
Hmm.
situation 3 summers in a row in
Hmm.
Massachusetts on the Cape. And
Hmm.
then that's all the restaurant. I mean, it's a very hard work to work at a restaurant,
Absolutely.
but
I
yeah.
had an amazing experience at Legoland. The one customer service, true customer service I've ever had was actually incredible, and I was not expecting to like it. But I know exactly why, because I saw most other jobs in the park had the customer service stories and issues we know. I
Okay.
had I had only one Karen experience, which we can talk about maybe later. But the reason I didn't have Karen experiences, I didn't have people screaming at me, even though this was working at a theme park in the middle of COVID, is simply this. Remember the last time you were at a theme park, especially with young kids?
Yeah.
Think of when you were getting hot food, lunch or dinner.
Right.
Everyone is hungry. Everyone is hangry. The parents are hungry. The kids are
Yep.
hungry. You've probably been out doing stuff and are, well, tired
You're
out and
tired. You
lashing
want
out
to sit
at each
down. You
other
want to
and
eat
other
some real
people.
food. Yep.
Think of what your mental state is like when you're waiting with your kid in the ice cream line compared to that. You're
That's a lot of
probably not
whining.
angry at the world and the lines. You're probably
Yes.
just giving your kid a treat because they weren't screaming for 5 hours in a row.
Okay. That's a better look
So
at it.
people are
Yeah.
nice, and I actually enjoyed doing how was your day? Customer service, tour guide, a bit of tour guide for my local area because I'm from Legoland, literally 5 minutes away
Yeah.
from Legoland.
Okay.
What local beaches are good if I have long enough to talk to people, like there's no line, all that stuff. I enjoyed it, but if I was working in hot food, as I had to do very occasionally, I know I would have not enjoyed that nearly as much.
Right. A little grumpier. Fair enough. Okay.
Yes.
I am fascinated and psyched that
Yeah.
you are breaking down the machine because that's not. I mean, it's food service. We had to empty
Oh
the
yeah.
fry later, but we
Hmm.
didn't do it as often as we should have. Let's just say that
Well,
because it was
actually,
also
go ahead.
yes.
Sorry.
No, it was also a tourist destination, and
Yes.
so there were a lot of things being fried. So it could have been emptied every day or two, but I think it was every 3 days. Sadly, anyway.
Yeah. It will. So before you get back into how I got to be a food scientist, that just reminded me. Frying oil, especially in commercial deep fat fryers,
Hmm.
they it is good to empty it. Depending on how much frying you do, yes, every two days, 3 days. However, especially in a small in home cooking and very smaller operations, reusing frying oil is actually to an extent for a bit good, and then it goes back, and then it's not as good again. When you're frying foods, you are applying a lot of heat to lipids, these fatty acids,
Right.
and as you have a bunch of foods frying in them and pieces of breading and carbs degrading and going to the bottom, that and the breaking down of the lipid chains in very small amounts actually reduces the boiling temperature of the oil. So it makes it more energy efficient to fry
Oh,
things in, and it does add a little bit of extra fried taste.
okay.
So actually, the biggest fast food restaurants, I believe, they do incorporate, the energy savings into their cost operations of use fried oil. However, you do not want to use frying oil for, especially in the same deep fat fryer. You don't want cooking it too often because then you start getting burnt flavors. The fatty acids will start breaking down even more. And it can start forming acrylamides, which if you're in the state of California and see those warning labels about this stuff has acrylamides, may cause cancer, that's very small amounts are
Right.
safe. But if you're eating fried food every day and
Right.
all of these buildup of acrylamides, which is relatively innocent thing, but it's produced from the breakdown of fatty acids under very high heat and
Okay.
over extended periods of time. If you eat them too much for too long, you are there. Studies have shown increased risks of, I believe, colonic or intestinal cancer.
Okay.
So don't eat the chicken McNuggets for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is what I'm saying.
Right. Just try to keep it together, and try not to have fried foods every day. Yes.
If you deep fry something, you're like, I don't want to dump out all this frying oil after frying something in it once at home.
Yes.
Save it. It's going to be probably easier to cook with the next time you use it. We use it once or twice. It's not.
Could you freeze it?
Not okay. No. Freezing
oil.
Freezing doesn't really work with. Actually,
everything.
Maybe with stuff that's more saturated, like butter. Butter you can freeze. I assume animal fats you can freeze. More unsaturated fats, think avocado, think olive, think canola. They don't freeze as well because they're more liable to break down under heat shifts.
Oh, okay. So you can get a bit more separate or split.
On the molecular level, yes. On the it basically leads to oxidation and rancidity. Like rancid butter. That if you keep your butter in the freezer, that's perfectly fine. It's saturated enough. It's saturated, meaning it has more hydrogen. It doesn't have any double bonds on the molecular chain organic chemistry wise.
Okay.
Basically means it's more stable.
Okay.
Less stable stuff doesn't take the big heat shifts and other.
If you fry something with canola oil or whatever, and then you want to save that oil, you have to save it in the fridge. Don't save it in the.
Oh, not even in the fridge. Just get like an empty bottle and just funnel it in. It keeps on.
How long will it last before it too grows rancid?
It won't last as long as regular oil because it probably has a bit of fried bits, but probably like a good month or two, in my experience.
All right, and know that Alexander has said double check. So yes,
yes,
that is that is probably right, but make sure you get at least one more source on that.
Yes,
and
I do have a list of recommended reading at the end of this too.
He's brought a syllabus.
Perhaps have
okay, so you cook, but you don't want to. You end up not deciding not to go into professional restauranting, cooking and chefing and this type of thing, but you're still interested in food.
Exactly. I still love food. I want to work with food. I also want to not be working on my feet all day, every day. I want to have something that engages me mentally more than physically, perhaps.
Okay.
And I like science. I like history and culture. I wanted to find something that combined as many of those things as possible. And I was so happy to find a bit, not so much of that, but that's my own hobbies within food science. Food science usually doesn't go into the food culture, but there are some people who study more food studies is actually a thing, usually subset of either anthropology, sociology. It kind of is more a small field, but of kind of interdisciplinary food studies. I believe UCLA has a program in it. A few universities in the United States and Europe have it.
Wow. I like the idea of it. Have you taken any of those classes, sort of food studies?
So my university doesn't really. I've taken things like food and culture, which at my university is more along the lines of nutrition, which because we have a big dietetics program. Dietitians should know the dietary habits and just general. They should know as much about the cultures that they're serving as possible. Because if you are telling, regardless of what culture who your clients are,
the
who
group
your patients
of people are,
what their dietary habits, what they eat or don't eat matters. If you're telling them you should eat apples and bananas to get this vitamin, and that's just not something that they regularly consume in their diet, and they have some other things that are more culturally appropriate that they regularly consume, especially in immigrant communities, which are very common in, of course, United States. Yep. They need culturally, they need both medical practitioners and especially dietitians who know how they operate, how their diets work, and what people normally eat.
Just to have to know the specifics to the people that you're trying to actually serve that community. So
exactly. So I took a food and culture course because of that program.
Okay. And so what's the science on what you're doing? Like what kind of science do you
Absolutely.
have to know?
So, food science is
Yeah.
usually at my university. It's within the same department. It's nutrition and food science. Kind of two sides of the same coin, but we don't. But we do different things. We don't inter. We don't do a huge amount of collaboration other than extracurricular stuff.
Okay.
So, food science is the applied science of food. So it seems simple enough, but
Yeah.
we are looking at food at the microscopic, macroscopic levels from the molecule, from how different molecules of that make up our food work and interact with each other, to how do I make an entire food processing line that can pasteurize hundreds of gallons of milk every second,
Oh,
everything on that scale. So
okay.
food science, again, it's you studying the physical, biological, and chemical makeup of food, how and everything that happens to it. So before you get into the actual food science courses at most universities, including my own, you have
Yeah.
to get to know science,
Yeah, like chemistry
a
for
lot of
sure.
chemistry,
A lot of chemistry and
organic chemistry, general chemistry, now
right.
biochemistry at my university. Though I believe when
Yeah.
my class was one of the last in terms of like the year I entered was one of the last where you didn't have to take biochemistry. Now it is and mandatory for any incoming majors.
Okay.
Also biology, especially basic biology and especially microbiology.
Okay. And microbiology, is that like atoms and I mean,
Oh
how
no,
no no
that is
whatever what is
bacteria and
micro? Okay.
fungi.
Thank you.
It's anything living that is either too small to see with the naked eye or too small to easily deal with your hands. So in most cases, that is leading us into food processing and food safety. Those are
Okay.
prerequisites for
So is the chemistry and biology that you're studying, is it mostly plants or is it plants and animals?
everything. Anything that
Wow.
becomes food, we end up having to study. We have to take the basic biologies and chemistries, even some physics and engineering,
Okay.
in statistics and all that. We have to take all these courses that everyone a lot of STEM majors is science majors at universities have to take. But
Okay.
then in our up division courses, where we start doing more straight up food science courses, we are applying these principles, everything we've learned previously, to actual foods. And we usually don't think of it. We usually don't separate like class on plants, class on animals. In
Oh,
most
right.
cases, we are doing food chemistry, which looks at for example, food chemistry looks at the building blocks of food at the chemical level. So carbohydrates,
Ah,
proteins, lipids, water, of course, is very important because it's most of food, most of us is water.
right, right. It's true. Um, so and then are they mostly teaching these classes for you to enter into the food industry
That
as a
is
chemist or biology, or what is that?
That is correct. So most people in food science do end up in the food industry. So in the food industry, what food scientists will do, they can do many things, but what most of them end up doing is product development or quality assurance are the two
Too
biggest
big.
job
Okay.
titles, I would say.
I have a
So,
friend who is a food scientist and has been
okay,
for 40 years. He went to Purdue,
very
graduated in
good
the
school.
late 80s. He
Hmm.
went to China to teach them to teach a factory how to make
Hmm.
instant coffee.
Yes.
And so he worked for General Mills or General
Hmm.
Foods or he always referred to it as the General. And it was some sort
Yes.
of
General
large,
Mills.
okay, some large corporation. And in 1989, he had, you know, those Starbucks iced coffees?
Hmm.
He brought home a 4-pack of essentially iced coffee in a jar
Hmm.
that had been sweetened. But it
Hmm.
was 1989.
So
So
Starbucks
we were
hadn't really hit the
like,
scene.
yeah, Starbucks didn't even exist. And so I tried it with his wife, one of my best friends, and I said, "What
Hmm.
the hell? This is disgusting. Why would you drink cold coffee?" And here we are, 40 years later, 35 years later.
The explosion of Starbucks, the explosion of coffee culture in the United States, probably one of the biggest massive shifts in our food culture within the last 40 years. It's really been massive. Previously, almost everywhere in the United States, coffee is coffee. It's just you brew the beans, and now espresso the variation of espresso culture that places like Pete's and Starbucks have spread across the United States and the world is what people think of as coffee. I mean, I ask most of my peers at university of my age when they think of coffee. I don't drink coffee myself, but when my peers think of coffee, they're thinking espresso drinks. They're thinking cappuccinos. Very few people just drink up straight coffee. In most cases.
That's amazing. That is, my husband Andy does not drink coffee, and he's actually not even interested in it. So but it is. Are there other foods that have changed, sort of, because it sort of changed the course of how people hang out and where people go, and it did more than just, now we're drinking a lot of coffee, which makes us very aggressive. I was told by my hippie friends that possibly too much coffee can make you a little aggro. So
I'd like to do a study on driving behavior and drive-through Starbucks now with that in my mind.
Okay.
That's fascinating to think about.
Yeah. So I have asked sort of the main questions I wanted to ask. What do you love about it? What are some of the weird things that? Yeah.
So, as a person who has a lot of love for culture and history and its application in food science, that means I like trivia. I like learning weird little nuggets of information that can be really interesting jumping off points for strange conversations. I apply this in a competition called the College Bowl, which is the most intimidating, sporty name for what is essentially a high-stakes competitive team food science trivia.
Okay.
It is run by the Institute of Food Technologists, which is the professional association for food scientists in the United States and much of the world. It is run by the Institute of Food Technologists Student Association. And almost every university that has food science in the United States has a student chapter of IFTSA.
Okay.
Including my own. I'm very active in it. That's not the point. IFTSA runs several competitions. There's product development competitions where literally people are developing entirely new products, just like you would in industry, and competing with both their business plans and the actual quality and safety and taste of their product with judges from across the industry.
Yeah. Okay.
Imagine a science fair, but you've worked on it for 9 months.
Okay.
And you've actually done sensory studies, and you're literally making a food product. You're making packaging. You're making food. You're making processing diagrams. You're doing everything that industry would, because this is probably what you're going to do in the future.
Right.
So there's product development competitions, there's research competitions, but the most fun one, at least in my opinion, is College Bowl. We have 2 teams of 4. From teams each university has a team. You have 2 teams of 4 people going up against each other at a time. They're at tables. They have buzzers. It's literally like a game show.
Right.
They're asked questions from any area of food science, whether it's the weirdest trivia question or the most most technical engineering question.
Okay.
And it's a race to buzz in, get points, answer correctly, or lose points if you answer incorrectly. Right. There's even more in-depth bonus questions where the entire team gets to collaborate, but they're usually much harder.
Okay.
So I've done this for about 4 years. It is an incredibly fun extracurricular.
Okay, and do they do it normal? Do they do it regularly, rather? Like, is it weekly or
annual
monthly?
Event.
Oh, annual.
It is. So
and how many
there are the regionals, which are coming up in late March.
Okay.
That if the winner of the regionals, because each university is in its own region.
Okay.
Of IFTSA, the team that wins regionals, it's double elimination, bracketed. Team that wins regionals goes on to nationals, which is held at the big IFT First convention in Chicago, Illinois, which I've had the pleasure of going to twice, and it's amazing.
Right.
And yep,
yes. Go ahead.
Nope.
Are there good like all I was going to say is like what were your favorite questions? I mean, what are they?
That's what I was getting into. I've made many rounds, practice rounds, because literally our teams practice the entire school year for this event.
Okay.
Because it's both, it's fun, but also teaches us a lot about even stuff that we haven't information from classes we haven't taken yet. And it helps us with our confidence. You're literally buzzing in to say something that you're sure about. And that's really intimidating for a lot of people when you're up on stage in front of dozens or hundreds of people.
Right.
And you don't
want to be wrong. You want to be fast. You want to be accurate, and it can be intimidating. But
so you have to know your stuff.
All weird topics of things that may not have been stuff you studied.
May not.
Yeah.
So I've taken a few questions, both stuff from questions I've seen and rounds that I've made as practice.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of them, and if you know the story, great. But if you don't, then we can learn about it.
As long as it isn't a band, I've got a good chance. Let's do it.
We're good. What kitchen appliance inspired Nike's first shoe? Think about the sole of the shoe as well. Closer than you'd think. A waffle iron.
Oh, right, because of the grip.
Yep. The I forget his name, but the inventor of Nike, the founder of Nike,
right,
literally was trying to design sports shoes back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw his wife pouring waffle batter into a waffle iron, and he had a eureka moment and borrowed the waffle iron for a few days with his wife's permission and poured the rubber, that they make suture holes into it and use that patterning to create the first gridiron, I think it was called, Nike shoe.
Okay.
And of course, it's gone much more advanced after that, but waffles are the original inspiration for Nike.
And how often do you eat waffles? She was probably like, sure, but if you're going to take it to work, do me a favor, really clean it before you bring back your weird plastic shoe, whatever mold you're making. That's awesome.
It's hilarious. If you ever take a chance, look up the Nike first shoe waffle. It literally they use almost identically the sole, the underside of the shoe. It's like just a waffle. It's the same shape. I think it may have made the size a bit smaller, but it's hilarious to look at.
That's awesome. I love that. Because where else would you get ideas to make anything? You would get the idea from just looking around, going, all right, well, that's going to be whatever that is, So that's hilarious. What else you got? Yeah.
Well, this is a bit of a more conventional question. Do you know the difference between jelly and jam? Not many people do. Because what do you think about this?
I have heard it told to me, but I do not know offhand. Please elaborate.
So jams are made with the whole fruit. Try to smash it, you get it down to a nice consistency, and you mix sugar in, you cook it with sugar, it's a nice, essentially a sugary...
It's like the whole raspberry.
Yes, so if you're doing a jam, you have the seeds, you probably have extra fiber from the skins and other parts of the fruit. Jelly, you're just using the juice. If you have grape jelly, you have grape juice that you mix with sugar and some sort of gelling agent, perhaps, and you cook it down and you put it in a jar.
Why is anyone eating jelly? This is not. Don't you want the whole fruit? I would think that it would be healthier to have the whole fruit.
Jelly does have a kind of cleaner consistency if you really like that. I'm not huge consumers of either, but
right. Right. The amount of jelly and jam I eat, it's 3 times a year, maybe. And we have all the different kinds. But what you're saying is that, and it's probably why I've never seen a strawberry rhubarb jelly.
Yes.
Because you can't really juice a rhubarb. And,
or take all the seeds out off a strawberry at that point.
Right. Right. Oh my God. All right. Well, there's a fun fact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, if you ever, if you have any, and like, if anything like doing explanation comes up that you want to inquire about, I'm happy to answer questions. If anyone, even listening, has a burning food science questions, maybe email it in or
Go to
Instagram
ze
handle.
_Mathios and
Mhm.
ping him on the Instagram, and he would
And yeah,
no doubt want to talk to you about whatever your question
and
might be.
if I don't know it, I know someone who does.
Yeah, you do. It's so what would be your sort of dream industry to work in food wise?
So this is gonna get interesting because my dream job is / was, but is because I have hope to work
Yep.
in regulatory with the FDA or the USDA.
Oh yeah, there is
We're
trouble
recording
there.
this in February of 2025, and there's
That's
many
right.
things
We're
happening in the federal
33
bureaucracy.
days into a real shit show. So
Yes.
so what is that job? Has that job been traditionally working at the FDA or the
It is there are many different roles that people with the FDA do.
Okay.
In the food operations, there's many roles under that, but what a lot of people do and what I would wanted to start with would be being a inspector. Every
Okay.
food processing facility in the United States that is of a certain size is registered with the FDA.
Okay.
Every single one. Because if you have an outbreak of some foodborne illness,
Right.
it has to be traced back to somewhere to address it.
Okay. Because then you
So-
could find sort of ground
yes.
zero and then
Exactly.
clean it up from that area, or
Exactly.
and see where
exactly. And
just see where the closest place you could sort of stop it so that it
Mhm.
doesn't just keep spreading, and you don't have to stop it too far away when there might be healthy
Yes.
food. Like there's probably healthy food 60 miles from there, and you could stop
Mhm.
the spread at like 30 or
Yes.
20 or something. Yeah. Okay.
So what you have is you have people. The vast majority of food processing facilities in the United States have to be inspected. It depends on the facility, but every so often, could be multiple times a year, could be every 3 years. Usually,
Okay.
the less compliant, the more past history there's been of issues at a food processing facility, and more it's inspected by the FDA.
Okay.
But you have basically you have inspectors going on a circuit in a given region from facility to facility to facility, and essentially auditing, but not with money, but with everything else. Is there any signs of there's a leak in the ceiling in the production in the production room? How is that being addressed? Is it is it from refrigeration? Are we able to perhaps they're going to take samples and test for microbiological data, especially if there's instances of bacterial pathogens like listeria or
Right.
Shigella coming from that facility in the past at any point.
Okay.
These are the
so
people who regularly visit every facility and, if necessary, take action, and ramping up to, I believe, in the early 2010s, you remember the peanut butter, when all the peanut butter manufacturer got
I
shut
do
down?
not. Much like jelly and jam, 2 or 3 times a
Yes.
year with the peanut butter. So did they have to shut down a lot of peanut butter?
This is probably one of the most horrific cases of abuse of food safety in recent history.
Really?
Usually, if there's something wrong going in the facility, it's out of it could be out of ignorance or apathy or just not knowing the proper procedure, but it's very rarely out of explicit criminal negligence, like for a
Okay.
prolonged period of time.
Yeah.
Then there was this was one of the worst examples of that, which is rare but actually happened,
Yeah.
is the Peanut Corporation of America. It was run by a man
But they
named
sound
Stephen
so
Parnell.
respectable. The Peanut Corporation of America.
They were a respectable company. I believe they were a family-run business, and when there was the next generation took over, they as a peanut processor in, I believe, Georgia and Virginia
Okay.
in the American Southeast, they started lowering their standards,
Okay. And
and
what was the name
their
of the guy?
facilities started
They
getting
introduced.
this man. So the man who had the most strict sentencing from the incident is named Stephen Parnell.
Okay.
And if you mention him in food circles, especially food safety circles, you will get you get a pin drop. Everyone knows this story, and this is like one of the most horrific stories of negligence in modern food science.
Okay.
There was repeated salmonella
Ooh.
outbreaks because of his peanut butter.
Huh.
And he used every method he could to throw off the FDA and delay proceedings. His facilities were absurdly like turn of the century.
Like 1900, turn of the century.
1900. The reason we have any food laws level of dirty rat droppings, bugs, leaks, etc. It's like a whole nother level, and he probably I think he won the most strictly. He received one of the longest sentences for criminal negligence for foodborne illness, for being responsible for foodborne illness. I think ever. I think it was 30 years because of people died because of
Oh wow.
his actions.
Yeah.
There is a law, I forget the exact one, but if a food company, especially if there's actual harm and especially death because of a foodborne illness outbreak, even if it's criminal negligence, which is usually not something that gets a very high sentence, if people die because people didn't take food safety and cleanliness seriously, the executives of that company can and there's a process to make them be charged for very high counts of criminal negligence because they are responsible for.
Are they ever charged with murder? Like some sort of manslaughter, or?
I believe it's like that level. Basically, because they didn't.
They're not choking.
I believe
people.
It's basically they do that exact same year of like the amount of the sentence of manslaughter, but for criminal negligence. Because even if they didn't, even if they didn't directly intend it, they allowed food that they knew was utterly unsafe for human consumption to enter the marketplace to do whoever ate it, and it's obviously not the employee's fault. It's who they're oftentimes working relatively low paid workers. So I mean, it likely isn't even the lower level quality assurance people's fault. It's really the executives, which could include the manager of quality, people who are supposed to be keeping the this activity in check, and of course the presidents of the company, who in this case were extremely oblique and belligerent in allowing this to happen.
Like literally just for the point of profits. They're like, we're not going to fix this.
This is a case that is this is not a thing that happens in most situations. Whenever you hear about food recall, even if there's a bit of mishandling of communication, what Peanut Corporation of America did is pretty much unheard of in terms of sheer evilness, basically,
just
in the food
scale
industry.
And
the scale and just how utterly not careless, outright they were in allowing this to happen, in preventing inspection and not changing things.
Right. Did it feel like, did they at some point feel like it was purposeful? They're like, who cares who dies when they eat peanut butter?
Was very I believe internal communications from executives and the company that was seized by the FDA and other agencies were indicating that. The FDA, fun fact, does have an Office of Criminal Investigations. There are FDA inspectors who are officers of the law. They carry firearms. You'll never see them though. They're very small and they're mostly working with drug.
Mostly the drug part of the Food and Drug Administration.
Illegal drugs.
Okay.
More like illegal, off-brand pharmaceuticals that are actually causing harm. But in the case of the P Corporation of America, it was those people, U.S. sheriffs they got cracked down on hard in the end.
Wow, they got the attention of the guys with the guns.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
hard to do.
That is hard to do in the food industry. Did you do any? Are you also in with your degree studying sort of drug? The food science,
No.
does it involve drug science? No. Okay.
I could I probably with my background could do fairly well in trying to enter like the cosmetics industry or maybe in pharmaceutical people
Okay.
do, but mostly going in there from a quality assurance perspective
Okay.
of we know how the even if we don't know the product itself or how product itself,
Mm-hmm.
we still know a lot of chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very good amount of knowledge on how to how to process things, how to have certain levels of standards for how clean something is, or how pure something is, or how various attributes of the food, or in this case, drug. It's just with drugs, you have to be a lot more careful, and
Okay.
all the regulations are a lot stricter in terms of if this is a pill like of this medication, it has to be exactly this amount of medication.
Okay,
And
that makes sense,
dosage.
and that kind of
While
thing.
you can be a bit more loose with food,
Right,
not by much, by
but
little.
yeah, I can't imagine it's a lot, but it does make sense
Yeah.
that it's a little more. There's a lot more minutia when you're dealing
Yeah.
with milligrams of oxycodone or whatever it's called.
Mhm.
So, yeah. What's another fun fact about food science? What do you got?
Absolutely. Long story short, I do hope to be work in government someday. I have a very strong sense of civics. I want to work I want to do work that that is able to contribute positively to people across a region, possibly even across the country.
Yeah.
That is not going to happen anytime soon, and I'm okay with that. And I'm
Um,
going to do. I know I've worked in industry before, and I enjoyed it, so I'm gonna do what I can to prepare myself for a better time.
Yeah, yeah. You'll get
Yes.
experience in the private sector, and
Absolutely.
then when we have a government again, you can possibly get a job in the government. So
I hope to be part of a glorious restoration of the federal bureaucracy, as weird as that sounds.
right,
Someday.
that is a glass half full attitude. It's
Yeah.
going to be. Here's what's happening, you guys. It's going to be a bloodbath, and then there's going to be a glorious restoration, and that is what has happened in every government, in everything on the planet. And we thought we were past it, but me and my undergraduate degree in political science can tell you that we're not past it. Anyway,
Yes.
so
More food, more fun food
more
facts.
food, yes, please.
So, this is another challenge for you. Can you order the following 5 foods in order of invention, from oldest to newest?
Oh,
Potato chips,
potato
sliced
chips.
bread,
Okay.
potato chips, sliced bread, cheese whiz, spam, and cornflakes. I know a good bit about each food, but it's just really thing because you don't think of these foods as being like old. You think of it, especially of certain times, but when you think about it, you don't really know how old they are.
Well, now I saw a documentary on PBS about spam.
Yes.
It was about Hormel and and Oscar Mayer, and it was about processed meats, and it was fascinating actually. And I know that the guy at Hormel actually invented the hourly wage. This is what I know about that guy. It was
interesting.
Did you know that? It was right at the beginning of the Depression, of course. Hormel made fancy canned meats. That was their jam. They were whole meats. Anyway, so but the seeds and all were put into cans, and they sold them to fancy people for an extraordinary amount of money. And then the Depression happened, and in rural Minnesota, he did not want to fire anybody. So he said, I'm not going to fire everybody. I'm going to make sure everybody works every week. So for a month or two, there was no structure. He just tried to do it. And so thousands of factory workers rioted. And they said, we have to know that we're making what we're making per week of anything. And he's like, Excellent point. Please don't kill me. Here's an idea. How about everybody gets 8 hours a week
Mhm.
for sure? And so then you will make at least $16 a week or whatever.
Mhm.
These numbers are approximations. I can't remember exactly.
Mhm.
So he actually created the minimum wage.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I guaranteed. And he was also the guy who created I think it was company insurance,
Oh,
where he
interesting.
covered corporate insurance. So now that was in, and then he created spam in the late 30s, and then World
Yes.
War II happened. This is the only one I know. A potato chip seems like it should have been created very early on. Cheese Whiz seems to have some sort of launching vehicle. That feels more like the 50s. Corn Flakes.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Post? Who invented? I know I shouldn't ask for hints,
Kellogg's.
but it was Kellogg. Okay. And
Post
sliced
immediately
bread.
had their own version, though.
You're talking sliced bread in a package, not just the idea of slicing bread as opposed
Sliced
to ripping
bread
it
that you
apart.
buy and it's already sliced.
There we go.
In the
There
market.
we go. I'm gonna go. It's gonna be pretty arbitrary. I'm gonna go potato chips, sliced bread, spam, cornflakes, Cheese Whiz.
Close. Cornflakes
So
are out of
cornflakes
place.
are off? I knew it! As soon as I said it, I was like, I should have put them earlier. Where were they?
All good. So potato chips is 1850 in the 1830s approximately. The legend goes that they were invented 1853, but there's recipes from the
Okay.
30s. It's just they're popularized in the early mid 19th century.
Okay.
They were actually originally only in upstate New York. They're like an upstate New York delicacy. It's like
Okay.
a local, food.
Where they're
Very
shaving
popularized-
potatoes.
Yeah.
They're
Like
frying
think,
them.
like the Thousand Islands, like the resort communities where all the rich New Yorkers would go.
Right.
Catskills and all that, that's where potato chips would be like, oh, this is a fun local delicacy that it's just a New York thing.
Okay.
Then
All right.
a guy from the South, a guy named Lay, goes up to New York, loves it, thinks, okay, it's a turn of the century. We know how to package things better, because otherwise, if they're doing it on horse and wagon and stuff, it's just going to get crushed up in the bag.
Right. Then you just have all shake. Just all
Yeah,
potato
I'm
chip
gonna
shake.
bring these back down south, and I'm gonna make a fortune making them. And that's where I
Okay.
get Lay's from. So potato
That's
chips
amazing.
first, then cornflakes.
Oh.
Cornflakes were the 1890s.
As a cereal?
Yes, it is flaked. It is cooked, flaked, puffed corn.
Okay.
It was invented at the Battle Creek Sanitarium, which is
Michigan?
run by the Kellogg's. Correct. Where both Battle Creek is where
I'm in
Post
Michigan.
and Kellogg's started.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm in Royal Oak, which is right outside of Detroit.
Yeah, you're not far. Long story short, the Seventh-day Adventists which have of course very strict health, very strong views on health
vegetarians.
and diet. Exactly.
Yeah.
They had a community up in Battle Creek. They ran basically a hospital and health spa that became extremely popular under the leadership of the brothers Kellogg, John Harvey Kellogg and William Keith Kellogg.
Oh, I don't think I knew they were Seventh-day Adventists. Look at me.
They were very
Learning
Seventh-day
things.
Adventists. They had this health spa that everyone everyone from Amelia Earhart, William Howard Taft, Henry Ford, Edison, all the great people, all like the cream of the crop of the early 20th century would go here.
Right.
To basically do cleansing. They'd cleanse themselves. They'd work out. They'd eat better. They'd try to feel better. And
then they'd go back and drink
different
scotch and smoke cigars with a bunch of knickerbockers. Anyway.
And fly a plane into the Pacific.
Right.
So they wouldn't. They didn't eat meat. Especially back then, eschewed spices and other such things. They wanted kind of bland, hearty, nutritious food. So the Kellogg's are So the Kellogg's invent a way to basically they're a way to puff wheat and make cornflakes and such. And they there's two Kellogg's. There's John Harvey Kellogg. He's the golden child. He's the doctor who runs everything. Everyone loves him. His parents got him to medical. The Seventh Day Adventist community locally pooled together to get sent to the medical school to run the sanitarium and be he massive ego on this man.
Okay.
Incredibly strange views on many different things, including very inappropriate things I don't really want to talk about on this podcast because of the time.
All right, so he
let's
was
just say circumcision.
Personally, he wasn't great, but professionally, he made cornflakes.
he had a brother named William Keefe, who was kind of like the dark horse of the family,
the black
sewing
sheep
machine salesman for his early childhood.
Oh, really?
But he had a much better business sense. He was not as like personable and egotistical and just up in everyone's face. But he was an excellent businessman. They always had a rough relationship, but they were close. They were brothers. They were working together. So they invent a machine that's able to make cornflakes. It literally puffs the corn. It's like a cannon. If you ever look up MoFad, Museum of Food and Drink in Brooklyn, they have one of these. And it literally it uses pressure to just a little kettle that brings all the wheat, corn, whatever you have, to pressurize them and cook them until they're so hot, and then suddenly all the pressure booms out, and all in the grain it puffs. The carbohydrates are gelatinized, so they're not hard and tough and mealy. They puff up. They are made into a crispy, crunchy, airy snack that absorbs milk. I cannot hear you.
That's because I moved my thing up to take a drink of water. It absorbs milk.
I see.
That's all I said. It wasn't that fascinating. Yes. I was just being supportive.
So you end up with this machine, and it's a prototype. It's not been patented yet. John Harvey Kellogg says, let's have this in the dining room, in the breakfast room. Everyone will see it. Everyone will love it. This is going to be so cool. And William Keefe's like, we don't have it patented yet. There's nothing stopping someone from observing it and just stealing our idea and running with it.
Right.
William Keefe Kellogg is overruled.
Uh-oh.
A man from Texas who has had a mental breakdown in the real estate industry comes up to recover to the sanitarium.
Sure.
He's a businessman. He sees
the
a machine,
really cool machine,
and takes notes and watches it and makes his own before it's patented. That man's name is William Post.
It is Post.
Post sets up a factory literally across the river in Battle Creek, right next door. And for decades, these two factories are rivals, like literally dead set rivals.
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld, the Seinfeld movie about the Pop-Tarts recently, that was about that rivalry as a dramatization and making fun of that literal rivalry in Battle Creek.
Right, except
they had different.
They took it very seriously. You can make fun of it,
incredibly
but I bet you Mr. Kellogg was pretty mad. I read a book about Marjorie Post, who was his daughter, and she was the one who expanded the Post empire after his death, and she built Mar-a-Lago. Speaking of Captain Knobjob and his douche nozzles, fascinating. And she should have taken it with her. Anyway, so that's cornflakes.
That's cornflakes. So I know the university I'm on, it was built on William Keefe Kellogg's winter home estate in Southern California, where he had an Arabian horse ranch. He gave it to the state of California. It's now my university.
Oh, nice.
Sliced bread.
Sliced bread.
1928.
Huh.
You've heard that Dolly Parton is older than sliced bread?
Yes.
She is.
She is actually. Was she born before 1928?
I believe 1926.
Okay.
She's 2 years older than sliced bread.
All right. Well.
Then you have Spam, as you know, 1937, the late 30s.
Okay.
Fed our allies in World War II.
Right.
UK and Soviet Union civilian soldiers basically just ate Spam because they couldn't.
Millions.
What else would they eat?
Right, made his fortune. on
Yeah.
Spam. Yeah.
And lastly, as you correctly predicted, Cheese Whiz, 1952.
Me too.
It's an aerosolized, it's a spray cheese, it's aerosolized cheese product in a can with a, spray, whipped cream style top.
What is in it?
American cheese, I assume, and a lot of emulsifiers. And American cheese is literally just a real cheese that has had a bunch of emulsifiers, things like sodium salts into it that just make it spread more easily and melt a lot more easily.
Okay. It's
People say American
plasticky.
cheese is plastic.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of has a plasticity in that sheen. It's not really plastic. It is maybe low. It could be low grade cheese or low quality cheese, perhaps, but still dairy product. It's just
Okay.
they add some sodium, some emulsifiers. I don't have any off the top of my head, but very safe. These are not like toxic things. This is just literally think of like calcium chloride, sodium chloride. This is not far off from salt, but it makes it melt much more easily. It makes it kind of stick together more as a contiguous, block rather than especially when heated. And it makes it easier to process with and make, a horrible aerosolized cheese product out of.
Right, it just launches it right onto a cracker in a beautiful star shape. We're almost at an hour.
Yep, I see.
Yep. And is there anything that you would like to close on?
Absolutely.
A happy food science. Let's hear it.
So, I have a few books for recommended reading. And one of them is a cookbook. So, do you know The Food Lab by Kenji Lopez Alt?
I've heard of it. Yes.
It is, I think, the greatest application of food science for the non-food scientist in your own kitchen.
Okay.
It is excellently written. It has amazing recipes, but it actually shows you through his own experiments with literally just cooking an egg in salted water, just different variations, how food science in your own kitchen actually affects what you get when you're eating it.
Okay.
What Einstein told his cook. This is a book of various little short essays and stories about what we're talking about today, random questions and interesting quandaries about food science. Like, hey, can I freeze this? Or what is MSG, which I could talk about for a long time as well. And is it bad or good?
Right.
And ask you if you want to take a real deep dive on food and cooking by Harold McGee. It is this thick. It is a massive tome of incredible, I don't have it with me, it's at home, it's all cookbook, but it's everything you ever wanted to know about each kind of food and food ingredient.
What's it called?
It's On Food and Cooking. It is probably one of the best popular food science texts out there. It basically explains the science and cooking and a lot of just the general trivia and knowledge about pretty much every food and drink you can think about especially from like fruits, vegetables, meats, how these work scientifically and how people have used them culturally. Highly recommend all of those.
My sister gave me a book. I think she gave it to me. It was a bread book about math and baking.
Yes. Baking is so precise.
Right. And it's called Ratio. And the simple code behind... Here's what I haven't done.
I know.
Read it.
Yep.
Okay. And so what I have done is I've looked at it. There it is. It's got a bunch of circles. The simple codes behind the craft of everyday cooking by Michael Ruhlman and Ratio. And it's all about, I guess, proportion to create breads, as I think, but maybe there was more to it. I only saw the bread part. Okay. Get this. It's been an hour. And you could talk about MSG just for another hour. So
most likely.
Alexander Mathios, thank you so much for doing the Dork Forest. If you guys have other questions or just want to follow him on Instagram and hang out, and there might be more food science trivia. You don't know. It's at ZE_Mathios. ZE_Mathios if you're not in the US of A. Thanks a lot, Alexander. That was super fun.
You're very welcome. You're so welcome. This was a blast to do.
And Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat.
They're dancing around my hat, my hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?